Hey everybody, welcome back to an all new X's for Show segment. I'm TK and you can find me all over the socials at xnateXgrayX.
And I'm Nico, and you guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at NicoAction. That's NicoAction.
And we are here to talk about this week's comics. We wanted to start doing it early, getting our books read and getting our feelings out there. Normally we're going to do this segment on Wednesdays, we think, but this week, just because we got life stuff, it worked out that it was going to be on Friday. And I'm actually a little bit excited now to discover that it is because in the midst of planning all this, we got some very cool new announcements. We got the next set of X books.
Yeah, that was definitely trying to read really quickly before we hopped on real fast.
And so the first thing I want to do is bring in my partner, Jake. And then I want to take a second to just talk about what we've had so far. We'll talk about some books, and I think we're going to get one more announcement while we're chatting. So maybe we can end up with that last one.
Awesome.
Hello, everybody.
Hey there. Who are you, and where can we find you?
Who am I? I'm a stranger in this place. No, I'm Jake. But for today, I'm Jake Weaver, Weaver of Jakes. And you can find me on Twitter at Mega Sentinel. That's OH Mega Sentinel. Yeah, and we'll just you can see my Instagram. I don't have to re-say it.
And so right off the bat, I just want to pull us into. We got Alpha Flight.
We got Alpha Flight. That's so exciting.
We got an Ed Brisson Alpha Flight book. Nico, do you have the artist on that?
I don't, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
That's totally okay. Right now I'm just kind of looking at it and reacting to the fact that we're seeing this original Alpha Flight team with Puck and Snowbird. I'm already right off the bat really stoked about this. I can see in the background, I see that Fang necklace, and I'm sort of wondering where we're going from there.
Oh yeah, they're definitely doing a second Genesis reference to the team the team popping out of the page with the old team in the background. You've got Fang. It looks like North Star and Aurora, and I don't know enough Alpha Flight to know who that person all the way on the left might be, but it looks like a symbiote. But
it's Nemesis.
Who's Nemesis?
It's a major Alpha Flight character from the last 50 issues or so of the title.
Okay,
cool.
Well, this is very exciting. I will be interested to see how exactly it falls into the Fall of X era. But I love an Ed Brisson book, so right off the bat, I'm super stoked for that. And then, of course, we have Children of the Vaults, written by Denise Camp, who I have not seen any of their other work, but I'm very excited to find out what they've got for Cable and Bishop. I'm very excited about a Cable book, and I think we all have been fascinated by Children of the Vault since they were first introduced.
And to see that the press conference says that they're going to be referencing back to the Mike Carey era and Hickman era and Jerry Duggan era, it's super significant that they're trying to build on something. And to know that it's only 4 issues definitely helps gauge my nerves.
Yeah, and the Alpha Flight book is only 5 issues. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of minis in this Fall of X era, and I'm very much okay with that.
Yeah, this was one of the storylines that I was really interested to see resolved from their reintroduction in the Hickman era. So I'm excited to see some solid screen time and not just sort of nestled into a larger arc. It's exciting. I love these characters.
And I just, I'll be really interested to see, because we've got characters like Sync and Laura who had such insane interactions with the Children of the Vault in the Hickman era and in the Duggan era, how that's going to play into a book that focuses on characters like Bishop and Cable.
Well, and as well too, so much of the Krakoa era has been shaped by this 3-pronged trajectory of mutants and AI and now post-humans, and Children of the Vault really represent that post-human turn in a radical way. And so seeing these 3 factions kind of coming to a head in conflict with each other, I think will be really I mean, I get why this is the Fall of X era. All of these storylines that we've been getting for the last few years are really beginning to come together and resolve. I think it seems like.
Well, now that we kind of talked about what we know is coming, let's talk a little bit about what we got today. And right off the bat, the first title I really want to look at is Guardians of the Galaxy #1. Extremely exciting to have a new Guardians of the Galaxy book in conjunction with the new movie that's coming out. We've got writers Colin Kelly and Jackson Lanzig, art by Kev Walker, colors by Matt Hollingsworth, and letters by VC's Corey Pettit, with this cover by Marco Cicchetto. I am not typically a Guardians guy, but I don't know. I kind of got into this book.
Yeah, the spaghetti western of it all was a lot of fun. The kind of like the grim overlay that let you know that this from the beginning, this is not a story about a win. Like there's no winning. There's just taking the hope that you can and getting the hell out of there. This turn with what they're fighting and how they're fighting it. It's really I'm so curious to see just to see the background and how they got to this point, and where it ends up, without giving too much of it away, because there's some big spoilers in this book.
Well, I mean, one of the things though is we definitely talk about anything in the book that we're talking about. So if there's anything from the book you want to talk about, I'm going to spoil anything that's in it.
Yeah, agreed.
Because it's discussing the book. So feel free to talk about.
If you're watching this and you haven't read them yet, maybe watch it. Watch the recorded version after you've sat down and read books.
Well, with that being said, whatever's going on with Groot is crazy, and I'm scared and sad, because Groot was one of my favorite. It's certainly my favorite, like, glue of the Guardians family in the MCU version of them, but it's also just like a fun comedic character in a lot of the Guardians content of the last few years, with some real turns towards depth as well. And this just seems like a sad turn for Groot. If it's Groot and not Groot's people, I don't know. It's there's so much mystery around what's going on. I do love an in media res like drop in, but I'm also left with all the questions that I think they want us to be left with.
And right off the bat, one thing I'm curious about for both of you is, how did you feel about the fact that they did lean so hard into the spaghetti western theme of the whole thing?
I don't know that it's a theme. I think it's a skin. I think what they did was they just took the movie and they just skinned it. And that's not necessarily to even say a bad thing, but one of the things we've been talking about on this show a lot is boutique runs. Boutique runs do a lot to help service a character that's maybe in a place that's really hard for the company to move them forward, right? So you find these characters like Daredevil. What anybody feels about Shadowland can be whatever they feel, but it like ultimately was literally Daredevil putting cops in cages in the sewer and telling them to shit and piss themselves. And like, that's just, it's really a little too dark for Daredevil. That's a very Punisher thing. That's a very, kind of grimdark Ghost Rider-y moment. That's not Daredevil. And so that Shadowland pushed it there, and the sales figure response and the critical response was, even if this has merit as a story, it doesn't have merit as a Daredevil story. They needed some way to bring him back, so they did a boutique run in the form of Mark Waid's Daredevil. And the boutique nature of that, of runs like Brubaker and Matt Fraction's Iron Fist, it's this idea that if you attractively redress a character, you can get past whatever the version was that just happened that you can't do anything with. And the version of the Guardians that just happened, while wonderful, celebrated, really beloved, would have been impossible to engineer a facsimile of in the films. Mm-hmm. So instead, we're doing something that, even though it is wiping away in so many ways the really cool thing we just had, it's putting such a different taste in your mouth that you don't mind.
I definitely see that. I think I'm not sure. I really enjoyed it, but like I do mind in some ways. I'm wondering, like, is this just a first issue thing where they're like, we wound up on this desert planet and it just kind of we had a Western episode rather than it's going to feel like this throughout the book? Or is it very much going to have this vibe throughout? That's one of my big questions right now.
Yeah, and I guess it also speaks to the level of tolerability that as readers we can have for the very clear, like, this seems like it's set up to get us in mind and prepared for the movie. We've got the movie characters. They're doing and saying movie character things even while it's happening in the comics universe. Do I care that it's taken such a hard turn? I guess I care less if it's a good story. I feel less cynicism about the corporatization of it if it's at least telling me something that feels, resonant with, an emotional experience that I'm interested in. I do like these characters ultimately, and I do kind of like the aesthetic that's being introduced in this issue, and I'm curious about whether or not it'll hold. If it is going to be a kind of space western, or if this is just like a one-off for the purposes of this introduction. Mysterious strangers come to town and save everyone. It's tropey, but it works as a start of a story.
You get these moments where, like, Nebula, I noticed throughout, is kind of talking a little westerny. And to me, it a little bit breaks the fourth wall almost, in that it feels like, we're dipping so hard into the skin. We do the same thing with Mantis being like kind of this honky-tonk showgirl, but then she's also switching personalities, which I find very interesting. But, finding her in the pub doing the honky-tonk show was a little bit like, wow, we're really going for it all the way.
I think this also perhaps shows an uncertainty with what Marvel thinks is going to happen with Guardians of the Galaxy 3. When they're sure the film is going to be a hit, they do everything they can so that when you pick up the book, it's identical. But I don't think that there's been any marketing of Guardians of the Galaxy that makes me think it's going to be a few Infinity Gems more. And so that all of a sudden, the comic, and they're leaning into this visualization, this is a change. I think they're uncertain that James Gunn's final foray into the Guardians verse is going to be the rousing success that the first two were. And by having something that, frankly, because I'm excited for the possibility of boutique runs, but you can cancel this and it would be fine. This could wind up 6 issues and it would be fine. This could wind up 48 issues and it would be fine. But whether they want to pivot to that popular run that's currently going, or have the ability to wipe this clean and go to the movie, this really reads to me like a corporate bet hedging in a way that, not that, I'm a big fan of these boutique runs, but it does not feel like Marvel is all in on this. It feels like they're all in on the cover.
I definitely see that. And, we get a lot of, like, everybody gets a moment of character introduction. You get a lot of cinematic scenes like this one where you see everybody in, tableau. You get, like, little moments of tension between characters. You have this moment where Gamora, like, throughout the book is drinking a lot. And so they set up a lot in one issue, but it does feel like there isn't hard commitment to a lot of it. It really is kind of in media res storytelling, one little bit at a time, and we'll see if we pick up on any of it.
And I think the tragedy is using Groot in this way is it's just salacious. I had an anxiety attack. Former contributor to the show, Kyle, I took a screenshot of a Hello Magazine headline that was Padma Lakshmi's ex-husband finally revealed. And I was like, if you've ever heard of Must See TV, you know that she was married to Solomon Rushdie, writer of the Satanic Verses. This isn't finding out everybody that Patty Boyd dated. This is like a pretty key moment in time space. And if you're someone who cares about Solomon Rushdie or Padma Lakshmi, you already know that. And there is no amount of clickbaiting me that's going to make me care. And that is my vibe on Grootfall.
I think I agree. I was really taken aback by the art in a good way.
Yeah, the art's incredible.
It's really, the art throughout is really gorgeous, but this panel of of whatever Grootfall is really stirred me in a good way. But I find that description, salacious, really interesting and not incorrect. I think Marvel has been really into kind of torturing its protagonists a little bit lately. There's definitely some of that coming up in Captain Marvel. But I get that it feels like Impact. I just, like everything else that we're talking about, I really look to the future and what this is going to mean going forward.
It raises a lot of questions for me, as far as, is this Groot the Groot that we know? Is this Groot's species? Was this always kind of a function of the Groot that we just didn't know about? That they were these kinds of, like, I'm guessing, like Genesis planet re-lifers where they would wipe everything out that's already there and replace it with Groot, like in a kind of Borgy kind of way, I guess a tree Borg. I don't mind the storytelling turn, the narrative turn, because I like a big swing, and this feels like a big swing. But make sure to get me there in the story. Make sure to I want to feel the stakes. I get the sense that the thing that lives under Gamora's drinking is grief at losing this friend, and maybe guilt, that Grootfall is happening, that somehow it was a failure of the Guardians. And if that's the case, and that is what they're telling us, then good storytelling already, because I'm getting hints of that, and I want to see that fleshed out. But yeah, I mean, I completely agree with the assessment that this is a story that, it could be 6 issues, it could be 48 issues, it'll be fine. It's cancelable, but in a way that they don't have to do it. If the movie is successful and people really glom onto this story, they can just keep it going on, and this is the next chapter of Guardians of the Galaxy. But it's so early in the run of this story, it's hard to like make these kinds of predictions at this point.
Is this one both of you want to keep picking up?
Probably for the mystery. I want to know what happened to Groot.
Kind of because it's my job. Like, there's books that
I
don't even... No, because there's books I won't even read for my job.
Yeah.
There's, like, books that I'm just, like, All Out Avengers. I'm looking at you. I'm just, like, hard pass. But I also feel like there is a thing, and maybe I misread, but I thought the last page said something about Mysterium.
Yes, it's a Fistful of Mysterium, which is another Western reference, which is one of the things that leads me to believe this is continuing.
Yeah.
And Mysterium itself is one of the. There are these pillars of the Krakoan age where they were like, come enter and be surrounded by these beautiful pillars, and then they realized these pillars are covers, not interiors, and they quickly tried to find ways around it, like whether it's the Kitty mystery box that's introduced in Marauders Annual, which pays off in a way that makes me kind of, it's one of those things where if your mystery is better than your solution, you actually don't have third act problems, you have first act problems.
Yeah.
Right. If one of my friends, and he's never going to write, so it's fine. I can totally sell him out. He has one of the best stories I've ever heard. Oh my God. And when he tells you chapters 1 through 18, they're amazing. And then he gets to chapter 19 and you're like, you don't know how to end this, do you? And he's like, no, not at all. And so it immediately ruins the quality of the story. Mysterium is one of those things that the Krakoan age sort of like trotted out, like, oh, look, now we're into new metals, huh? You thought we were all adamantium. No. And so we've got this new metal and it's Mysterium. And I think that's great. Big science, smart boy, good. But the actual payoff is, what does Mysterium do? Why do we care? What stake does it play? Telling me something is special isn't the same thing as making it special, because I can call myself a purple seahorse, but that doesn't make me a purple seahorse unless there's a reason to believe it.
I hear what you're saying. You know, when they first kind of brought it into the bigger Marvel conversation, it seemed like it was, and it seems like to some degree it still is now, kind of the standard intergalactic currency after the like series of wars that were happening in the lead up to Araco being established. Not that those were related, but there were wars happening, Sleaze War and all that. And the intergalactic economy collapsed, and this was one of the things that Araco was trying to introduce to both put themselves on the intergalactic stage and try and do something to help the community. But where has it shown up? You know, you might see it in the casino that Cordyceps Jones is running. They use it to encase Vulcan, because you know that's a good use for Mysterium, I guess. But beyond that, it doesn't seem like it seems like an economic problem, which is not really the most exciting comic book problem. How do you make that interesting? How do you make that exciting? I don't know. I was interested and excited when we were in the council chambers on Araco talking about the potential for Mysterium, but it's fizzled a little bit. And I want it to be more than just the standard intergalactic currency. That's flat on the page for me.
On the one hand, I absolutely agree. On the other, one of the things I noticed in a few books this week is that we are starting to really settle into that sense of like the mutants are back to being really present in the Marvel Universe and having ripple effects throughout, which is something that we had lost for a really long time during the Decimation era. We got back in really introductory ways when Krakoa started, and then it kind of felt like I was looking for it a lot and not really seeing it, but like, you know, Fistful of Mysterium being one example, and the current X-Men book and how it ties into Captain Marvel being another really good example. We've got X-Men 21 written by Jerry Duggan with art by Stefano Caselli, color art by Federico Blee, VC's Clayton Cowles on letters, and of course Tom Muller and Jay Bowen on design. That this is running concurrent with and interweaving with Captain Marvel, to me, is really fascinating and exciting. How are you guys feeling about this run overall? And are you reading, you know, the interweaving story between the two, or just X-Men?
I'm reading both this and Captain Marvel. This I'm a little more interested in, particularly because of the ideological schism that happens at the end of this story between Scott and Jean of all people. But I like that this is a story that's happening in two forks, and both of them involve a lot of X-Men characters. I started reading the Captain Marvel side of things because it ties in, but I was extremely satisfied with every word coming out of Rogue's mouth throughout. I think this was some of the best contemporary Rogue characterization we've ever gotten in this Captain Marvel story. So I've been enjoying both for different reasons, but I love a good Brood story.
And, you know, I really am a big Brood fan. I love Brood stories. I love Baby Brew. Think that one of the things that makes the Brood a really interesting story is the way they interact with the X-Men at large. Is they're about the monster hidden inside you, not about the actual monster you're facing. Right. So the X-Men are constantly up against villains who represent their equal in some way, their, you know, ideological counterpart. But the only way in which the Brood are an ideological counterpart to the X-Men is that they're like, you know, we're of this species. We're of this group that are just trying to survive, that are different and have different abilities and are hated and feared. Well, you know, the Brood are like rust. They don't really do a whole lot of good for the things they infect. But, you know, mutants have a whole lot more to offer. I think having Brew as a touch point really represents something that I think a lot of books are doing a lot more with the X-Men. Now, Brew goes back to the days of Astonishing X-Men by Greg Pak, but and then, of course, winding up in the pages of Jason Aaron and Nick Bradshaw's Wolverine and the X-Men. I literally just looked up at my Nick Bradshaw Wolverine and the X-Men hanging on my wall. And the thing that always gets me about Brew is right now, Brew represents the human touch point of the Brood, who are a bad guy. Madeline Pryor represents the human touch point of Limbo, which are demons. They're bad guys. There is sort of no end to the effort Marvel is going to humanize the bad guys at all times, which I think is the right engagement for the storytelling. But I do worry that the amount of it that exists between that and I'm not negative on it at all. I love all of these new characters, but I'm done with old mans and old womans.
Yeah.
I am done with characters who are phenomenal in every way, but because they represent an underserved minority, they are being defined by that underserved minority such that when the book changes in any way, I know they're going to be gone. They're not being given the opportunity to like weave into the universe. They're being told by editorial, put this character front and center. And then when the next writer comes in, they're going to have their character to put front and center. And like, there is this idea that if we just keep adding new versions of things, it's going to work out. But I just need Marvel to like slow down a little bit and invest a little bit more in Sync before you make me care about Sync and Old Woman Laura. I want to invest in each one of these amazing trans kids that are being introduced like issue after issue in New Mutants. But I feel like there have been so many new characters in New Mutants in the last 6 months, I literally cannot name them.
Yeah.
And that is a little bit my concern with this run. Brew represents the best of it, but despite thinking Laura is the best character and Old Woman Laura is terrific, she sort of does represent the worst of it. One too many doppel clones in a book where you're already complaining Laura, not you, but the general public is already complaining Laura is a doppel clone. Brew is just a beast replacement to so many people. I need to see Marvel really invest in these characters because every one of them is so spectacular. They deserve a little bit more than, what is this, part 6 of 7 of an ongoing... it's just even hard to even explain what this does.
Yeah. I absolutely see that. And, it's interesting because the way you talk about the humanizing of villains is kind of the opposite of what you're talking about with Grootfall, which is kind of the unnecessary villainization of good characters in this way that is like, isn't it insane? But does it really get us anything? I think, that'll be an interesting thing in Guardians to see, like, can they turn Grootfall into something that interests me, or is it just, as you said, salacious?
And I think that the Brood and this arc in general kind of represented a few too many things running concurrent.
Yeah.
I don't believe Jerry Duggan's X-Men book is a very good X-Men book. I think Jerry Duggan's X-Men book is an incredible X-Men line that should be weekly, and it should be like X-Men Blue, X-Men Gold, X-Men Red, and X-Men Silver. I don't care. But he's trying to do so many things that I get to these issues like this, and the Brew stuff doesn't actually feel well earned because I feel like the last time anybody really brought up Brew was in Empire. And so this feels unearned when there's so many storylines in Jerry Duggan's X-Men that I do care about. And it's not that this doesn't work for me, but I keep being told everything's about to change. I keep being told Fall of X, everybody's about to die or go Canadian and get written by Ed Brisson again. And I'm great. I'm here for that. Sure, change everything. Fall of X me. But you can't keep telling me the next thing is going to be great because I am starting to realize that you haven't actually closed out a single idea. And so now I don't know that anyone in the current X office is ready to execute the end of a story. And not to soapbox for a minute, but Jane Espenson, like one of the most successful female television writers of all time, once bemoaned the death of the spec script. She used to say that it's so great that everybody's starting to get jobs based on pilots, but every time you get a job based on a pilot, all you've proven is you know how to write a great episode structure. You don't prove that you know how to write somebody else's character in voice. And I'm starting to feel like maybe the writers of the current X books aren't being held to closing anything out because the goal is to keep this era forever. So nothing's finishing. I'm just getting part 3 of question mark. the best thing about Chris Claremont runs was every 50 issues, he said you can start over. I'm not getting that here.
My mind is blown. That's why I'm being quiet on it. And it's funny because, you know, the panel that I have up right now really kind of is one of the things that does exactly. I thought it was really. I think it's a really beautiful moment. You know, Jake and I were just talking about people being X-Men being right, mutants being right, and that as an idea, and the fact that we've got Brew here saying, "Is Cyclops right?" is very interesting to me, and I broadly would love to get into it in X-Men books, but it does two things. One, it kind of minimizes Brew and makes this now about, is Cyclops right? And, you know, Brew's whole experience as a mutant brood kind of gets minimized, but also it does do that thing that you're talking about of like, well, now we have an open-ended question and we haven't really solved anything. And I think we're having that same issue with Jean and Nightmare.
But isn't that the that's how morality works? There aren't a lot of hard answers to should the Brood be genocided because of who the Brood are. I mean, I don't agree with Cyclops ultimately. Like I think I take more with Jean on this, and I thought that the turn that Cyclops took felt a little unearned to me. His sudden rage at the Brood that didn't really exist in the same way before, and then you hear Bobby, you know, saying he hates and fears the Brood. Like, just like this really interesting insert language that made it seem like they were propping up an ideological argument that the characters didn't really believe in. Because I don't think that Scott Summers is going to be like, let's genocide a whole species. I don't fucking care. Freaking care. Care. I guess I see, and I guess what I do see is a writer trying to both sides an issue that doesn't really have both sides. Like, I don't think genocide is an appropriate response to anything, and I don't appreciate that one of my favorite, you know, characters is being made to be a proponent of it because his daddy got hurt. That feels unearned to me. On the other side of that is Jean's take is to me very well earned, born out of the lessons, the lessons she's been picking up through this arc, the reflections she's been having as she's come up against Nightmare, come up against the celestial god who judged her, thought about her role in committing genocide, the fact that she can never be forgiven for that, but she, you know, learns restraint and she learns how to move forward with it. All of that to me felt really earned, and her exchange with Brew, calm as it was, you know, even though it felt like she was holding her anger down. I don't know. This run has definitely been a controversial X-Men run. I agree, but I think in the look back, I've really liked what's been going on with Jean Grey, by and large.
So I have two hard pivots here, and they're both actual direct responses as hard pivots.
Yeah.
And I've already requested the art be generated. So my own personal AI bot is on it right now. He's also very handsome. But, you know, talking about how the Brew moment felt like it became about Scott instead of Brew.
Yeah.
It makes me think of something, and I don't want to surprise anybody on air, but I technically, legally, my name is actually Mr. Faggot because the balls pop out of my mouth, and I love that joke way too much. And I have to make the gayest reference possible. I used to say that when I watched Gilmore Girls, I could tell who wrote the episode based. Oh, my husband's the best. Based on the tonality and treatment of Lorelai. If Lorelai was treated like a complex woman who's here to kick you in the face, the episode was written by Amy Sherman Palladino. But when the episode focused on treating Lorelai as a deity, on hyper idealizing her through Rory's eyes, it was almost always written by Daniel Palladino. Almost always. And I think you see that a lot with Scott Summers through Jerry Duggan. He specifically, no matter what the story is, orients it around Scott the way that even any Daniel Palladino episode that wasn't meant to be about how Lorelai is great became about how Lorelai is great. And the other thing it made me think of is, speaking of unearned and doesn't feel good, I feel kind of bad for my wonderful husband, who, if he would love to pop in, he's more than welcome to join us on screen for a moment. But so we're watching every bit of Star Trek possible. Hey, handsome. And
Hey, pal.
we just got to Strange New Worlds season 1, which what a Raymond, those slacks are a knockout. And
Yeah.
it is quite literally one of the best seasons of any sci-fi show I've ever seen. It just pitch perfect, beginning to end, in a way Discovery isn't. But Discovery, I love you. We'll get to it in a minute. So Strange
It's just
New Worlds.
soap opera. It is what it is. The OC isn't the same as West Wing either.
I was genuinely upset when I was like, oh, I guess we're doing the Gorn now. Okay, Kevo, well, you're at the Gorn, and I guess it's time to be afraid, because they're telling you, not that it's been set up, I want to make a really shitty reference on air and scream something, but it would be spoilers, and I'm going to leave it out. But every time a certain character appears on air, Kevo and I heckle this character.
Well, we're hecklers. That's what we do.
That's what we do. We're Tyler hecklers. So
We were, in fact, unprompted, called the Gay Stetler and Waldorf in college.
by our professors, yeah. So anyway, this is just such a great example of sci-fi. If you are a Star Trek fan, you might catch a little bit of us talking about some stuff in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, specifically the Gorn being an alien parallel, an alien and Brood being, the same thing.
Alien.
Yeah, alien, like the,
Geiger.
Aliens.
my favorite thing. So I cosplayed Ripley the other week. So anyway, yeah, that's what I thought. Both of those things, Jake, you were very, very current and made me think of things that I thought of.
Well, since we are, talking about this particular interwoven run, I do kind of want to pull into the other half of it. Carol. That's Miss Marvel. We're talking about issue number 48, written by Kelly Thompson, with art by Sergio Davila, inks by Sean Parsons, colors by CC De La Cruz, letters by VC's Clayton Cowles. I feel like the more exciting part of the story is happening in the X-Men, but I'm really loving how the X-Men are involved in this book as well.
So I'm going to make a statement. I was not reading this book.
Yeah, me neither.
And then decided I needed to read this book. Hey, thanks, Unlimited. I think if I have a specific concern about the way this happens, is it's kind of my same problem with Mysterium over in Guardians of the Galaxy. I am all here for interconnectivity of story and interconnectivity of idea. Like, that's the hottest thing in the entire world. There's nothing cooler than when so Tori Sheehan, Tori, I miss you. I wish you were here with us. So when Tori is reading Daredevil with me, and she'll be like, is this really Thor? And I'll be like, yeah. She was like, it's 1972. And randomly this guy just lands on the ground and goes, you okay, Daredevil? And he's like, yeah, I'm good, Thor. And Thor just jumps away. Is that really what comics were like in the 70s? And I'm like, absolutely. And Tori's not dead. Yes, thank you. So Kevo, amazing. He actually has to pay Sting $5,000.
I know, isn't that insane?
How much money must he make a day on that?
Right.
Anyway, so Tori's not dead. So
very much alive, very awesome.
I worry so much that Sting won't be in the third season of Only Murders in the Building, the finest TV show on air. But and clearly I mean Sting the wrestler. So I worry very much that something that is so cool and so good and so powerfully X-Men happening in a book that is not X-Men will invalidate it, because fandom, if anything, is always fickle. There is no reason why, thing X works and thing X doesn't work and thing Y. And don't get me wrong, there's always the Katy Perry, Sarah Bareilles connection. When when Sarah Bareilles released Brave, it wasn't a big hit. Roar. And then when Roar came out 6 months later, it bumped Brave back onto the charts to a higher position than it had originally achieved.
'Cause people just wanted inspirational anthems, man.
And it put them in the right mood.
Right.
I'm concerned that I actually do find the Captain Marvel part more interesting. I'm concerned that this is going to get invalidated because the Brood isn't a Carol thing. It's a binary thing.
Oh,
Go on.
oh, I mean, I get where the concern comes from, and I think that people who really think that are just wrong, like historically wrong. The Brood is
Because they write the books.
So the thing I love about this Captain Marvel arc is that it's hitting so many historical reference points for the Brood. One of the first conflicts was the X-Men and Carol Danvers. That's when she turned into binary. Was when they first faced the Brood. The Brood Empress that we're seeing is the same design as the Brood Empress that we got in the X-Men versus Brood 90s miniseries. That two-shot that was really weird, and a continuation of the Brood arc that happened when the X-Men were in the Outback. Carol has as much claim to Brood stuff as Storm does, as Colossus does, as Kitty does, as any of the X-Men who were there at the time. More than certainly Gambit, more than Psylocke, not more than Rogue. Well, no, more than Rogue even. Well, Rogue's had her own Brood adventures, but and given how I know this has been lost in the ensuing decades, but Carol Danvers was for a long time a secret X-Men character, like one of Chris Claremont's favorite gals to work with.
Yeah.
She was in the X books. She was a featured character. She supported them. She helped them delete their information from the Pentagon database. Like, she was really important in that whole oeuvre, and she left when Rogue joined the team, understandably, and still kept popping back in Rogue's psyche every now and then. I guess, to me, as someone who grew up reading those stories, I'll forever see Carol as, an X-Men cousin, like a Care Bear cousin. Like, she's still part of that oeuvre for me. And so seeing her go on an adventure with this old enemy of hers and the X-Men, like the final battle, it feels right. And I'm loving the reference points that these writers are pointing to, and the resolve that they're giving us. Although I'm very sad about Binary.
I was gonna say, how do you feel about this character, Binary, this energy being that has come out of Carol that is unique and simple and just wants to do good?
It's a bit of a why for me.
I think for me, it has to do with the fact that Carol reached a point where, because I do get you saying she's a secret X-Man, but you are referencing stories that are 40 plus years old. And we've reached a point where, because I'm still with you on that, but no, she's a cop. She's a space cop. She's kind of like a brutal narc. She is absolutely full on ACAB. She's just, ACAB in a fabulous suit. And the thing that Binary represents is this beautiful reinterpretation of who Carol could have been. Carol with the X-Men was free. It's kind of like, the best Green Lantern stories paint the Green Lanterns as miserable space cops. But the best stories about Green Lanterns paint them as complicated people who want to get away from Oa. And I feel like, why? Well, because Carol's ruined in the popular perception at this point.
Yeah.
So many of our we've had 40 contributors at this point. We would get boos from people when she came up for a while because she's such a space cop, and because of Civil War II. I'm with you. She is forever, a special person in my heart. But I think Binary had to come back to remind us that there is a kinder Carol in Carol somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that. We got some preview pages from McKay's upcoming Avengers run where specifically Carol says, we shouldn't be cops. And people were like, see, she doesn't want to be a cop. And unfortunately, Nico, your point stands. You can't buy back that much time being a cop with one author's reference to it not happening. I like Carol a lot because the Carol that I know is the one that we're referencing.
There's a famous Italian actor, Daniel De Vito, and I believe what he said once was, "Some cocks can't be unsucked."
I love it. I pulled up this moment. Oh, sorry, Jake. Do you have something?
I was gonna say, I if the goal here is to move Carol away from that characterization, like we've had, tens of years of it at this point. I'm fine with that. If the goal is to remove her from this this very problematic system that she has become an upholder of, and make her an independent agent, and less beholden to what am I doing? Less beholden to to the authorities that she serves right now. Fine. Yeah, I would love to see her be more binary than Captain Marvel, than Captain Anything. But yeah, I also agree that she is burdened with this, last few decades of being a real hard ass, and not in a great way.
And I wonder how much of that has to go back to Chris Claremont creating a version of her that was just rot.
Yeah.
I mean, the psyche version of her in Rogue, which is for many people the predominant way they've read her. More people read Uncanny X-Men than read Carol in Avengers. So more people read a version of Carol that was diseased and rotting because it's the Jim Lee era. So that famous cover of that gross version of her attacking Rogue is like from the best-selling era of X-Men, which sold better than any era of Avengers. That version of Carol is probably one of the most recognizable visually to most fans, unfortunately. And when your version of her is literally decrepit and rotting, what are you going to do?
Just as a slight, not even a pushback, but just broaden the context a little bit, they did an episode in the animated series where Rogue confronted the psyche of Carol Danvers and made peace with her, recognizing that she took her powers, recognizing that she took something significant from her, and recognizing this was a superhero who she'd hurt. It was a really... it was a surprisingly nuanced episode for what it was, and it was a good as someone who didn't know really the origin story of Rogue before watching that episode. I was more curious about who Carol Danvers was coming out of that. So they definitely did her dirty in a lot of her portrayals in the later, like in the Jim Lee era X-Men stuff. Seeing Rogue fight zombified Carol post Siege Perilous was really disturbing and upsetting. But there have been other opportunities for us to get to know old school Captain Marvel. They've just been so few and far between.
So I've left us on this particular couple panels for a while because I feel like this kind of represents some of the best of the issue, in which, for one thing, gorgeous art, and the color art is absolutely insane. The greens, the purples, the reds, the pinks. But we also get a really gorgeous slice of a lot of different people, from Conan to Polaris. Gambit's in the mix. I think this is like the best place Gambit can be, surrounded by powerful women just kind of running service tasks. But Nico, I also wanted to point to you a little bit on this one, just because we've talked somewhat about Jessica, Spider-Woman, in our coverage of MC2 stuff and Spider People stuff, and I just wondered a little bit what you think of her in this context, really being the solid best friend to both Carol and Binary.
Honestly, I'm kind of resentful of this particular panel set. Yeah. Because this doesn't feel to me like it's anything current. It feels to me like it's... And if you liked this, check out Uncanny X-Men Omnibus, Chris Claremont and Jim Lee, Volume 2, where you can check out this team and many of their adventures. At the risk of sounding like a nouveau curmudgeon, or maybe an old young person, I don't know, but I'm really done with existent modality, and You know, there's this quote from Mark Waid that I quote way too much because quoting it so much actually is the problem with the quote. Mark Waid once said, until Frank Miller, no one really knew what they were doing with Daredevil. And then since then, everyone has done Frank Miller to varying degrees of success, including Frank Miller. And he also made a comment really positive about the Carl Kiesel run, which should, of course, be treated really positively. The Carl Kiesel run in the 350s is just one of the best things in the entire universe, 10 points. But I bring it up because everybody's sort of been doing shades of Claremont since Claremont. Even in the ways in which people avoid doing Claremont, they actually have locked themselves into the binary. You know, there's this joke from Brooklyn Nine-Nine season 5 where two people are competing for being the progressive candidate for commissioner of the police. And, you know, Captain Raymond Holt, our male lead, is like, I have an idea for like mobile precincts and making it possible to go anywhere. And the woman he's against goes, interesting. I have an idea to delete precincts altogether. And I'm so excited to hear all of these people tell me how I have a cool new way to not do Claremont. No. Why is his name coming out of your mouth? I understand that he wrote 15 years of books that everybody's referenced, but now it's been longer than he was on the books. Like, it's been 30 years since he quit in a huff. He was only on for 15 years. It's been twice as long since he quit. We can get out of the binary of Claremont or not.
It kind of reminds me, I'm not going to remember who said this. It was a famous fantasy writer who said, you're either doing your work and you're pointing to your Tolkien references, or you don't realize that you're standing on a mountain of Tolkien beneath you. And, you know, I think part of the reason we see so many people, whether they know it or not, consciously referencing Claremont is because, you know, Claremont gave us some of the first real, like, he literally wrote the book on what a good X-Men story consisted of at the time. And that's, you know, that was the era that captured people's attention on the X-Men.
Yeah.
The balance of soap opera drama with action, you know, even he hasn't been able to replicate it since. But I think that when people take those frameworks, the idea of like, how do you balance your storytelling with your action, but do it in a distinct voice? Like, I think Grant Morrison did a great job of taking that structure and making it their own. I think Mike Carey did a great job of taking that structure and making it their own. I think that there are a lot of writers who you can't get away from Claremont past a certain point because of the amount of time that he spent creating this mythos and method of storytelling. But you know, we get advancements of the form, we get developments of the form, we get people trying new things and not always succeeding. And then you get, you know, love notes to that era, which this feels like. This particular arc, looking at these characters, looking at the way they're interacting, looking at these strong Claremont dames who are all over the book, this feels like a love note to 40 years ago.
And that's why I ended on this last set of panels, because I think it speaks to what both of you are saying. It is very Claremontian and pulling in a lot of references, but I do think, you know, in that love note way, and also in just a very cinematic, like, we got the big group shot again and they're all going for the action.
I also really want to quickly kind of point to, is it Hazmat? Is that her name?
Yes.
Hazmat and Rogue.
Hazmat is a goddess.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's the previous issue where they have a chat about being people who have difficult powers to contain. And I've said this before, I think, but Rogue's arc as a character over the last 40 years has always been really interesting to me, especially once Carrie got their hands on her and started to give her control of her powers. And, you know, really like lean her into this role as, I've been through it, I didn't have control, I have control now, and I'm a teacher. You know, the fact that there are young, superpowered people out there who have heard of Rogue, you know, she's got this reputation that precedes her, who turn to her and say like, hey, like, you know, you're just like a huge role model of mine, like I really want, and she didn't turn and say, save it for the camera. She said, you know, this is really awesome. Like, of course, like it's tough, but like, yeah, you're gonna do fine. You're doing fine. You're a hero. Rogue, I love Rogue as an inspiration to young superpowered teens, not just mutants, but, you know, people who struggle with their abilities in general, because she is such a success story. And I love that happened in a Captain Marvel book because of the troubling dynamic that the two of them have had for so many years. This just seemed like a really great show for Rogue.
Now, I don't want to get bit on the foot by a small rodent that hates me, but I think I'm calling bad karma to myself, because I'm about to say Rogue is basically Britney Spears. She's a little bit Southern, but I think enough people don't quite catch that. No matter what her looks are, they're always kind of fashionable. I could see Rogue wrapping herself in a snake. But the point I want to make is when Rogue was first introduced, she was like kind of, and I feel so stupid making this comparison, but Rogue was athletic. And when you think about early Britney, literally in her first videos, she is in like a gym. She's in a high school gym. Like, that was a decision they made because not every girl was in an athletic form. And then Chris Claremont left, and he made some mistakes before that. But when Chris Claremont left, they just decided to replace Rogue with a slutty baby swamp rat. And she's just constantly walking around being like, oh, hello, Gambit. Is my boob out? And Gambit is like, yes, your boob is out. That's awesome. And that is literally Rogue's personality for like a decade, right? And the thing that it makes me think about is the way Britney had her agency removed from her. And all of her music was just turned into like generic club slut music until she took control of her music again and her life. And now she is an upstanding, look at her, and she got control of her powers, and now she controls her own legal state. And like, I do think there's a lot to be said about how the way we feel about Rogue, we root for her. We see her as a victor, not a victim, despite her victimizations and the way she inspired countless clones. I think Rogue is kind of the Britney Spears of X-Men.
I really see it. I love it.
You got me there. It took me a second, but I definitely I hear that comparison and I see it. I was trying to think of what Rogue's like bad club music would sound like.
I'm just really into Touch Me Sugar one more time right now. So.
Well, I'm going to cut in with a bit of news because we got the last announcement. We are talking about Uncanny Spider-Man, which is going to be written by Cy Spurrier with art by Lee Garbett, who did work on Death of Doctor Strange. And I guess, like Iceman before him, Kurt's going to be striking out on his own and is going to be bamping around New York City in Spider-Man garb for some reason. I'm not really, like, I'm reading the press release and there's just no real explanation for that, but he is going to be dealing with his mother and dealing with Spider-Man's rogues gallery. Nico, go.
The spark then kind of matches the Spider-Man. So for those of you who haven't been keeping up, they determined that it's really a bad thing to say that you get superpowers from radiation because you mostly just get cancer. Mm-hmm. So they've decided that every power that has radiation has some other thing tied to it. It's not just radiation. It's radiation and it's spider magic for Spider-Man. Yeah. And it goes back to my absolute favorite Spider-Man run of all time, the J. Michael Straczynski run, where it's introduced that Spider-Man is part of the Spider Totema. Yes, the spider was irradiated, but it was a magic spider.
Irradiated spider. Get into it.
Yeah, it's like a magic spider. Otherwise, how would it have survived the radiation? How would it be able to transfer powers through radiation? No, it's like a thing. And being an irradiated spider actually makes Peter unique among Spider-Men. Because not every Spider-Man is irradiated, which we learn when there's creatures whose whole shtick is eating spider people.
Yeah, sure.
And one of them goes to eat him and can't because he's filled with radiation, and the only thing they're weak to is radiation.
Like, okay, I mean, that's something. I don't know why we had to stray so far from mutates with unactivated powers whose powers got activated by different catalysts, but sure, magic spider totemic, problematic word. Magic spider powers, sure.
And so the spark is totally just the Web of Life and Destiny spider Destiny.
I noticed that he's wearing a bit of a Nully costume. He's got the red and the black.
And Venom just got the same costume too.
Yes, he did. I heard. I'm filling in my my King in Black mythos right now. So that stood out to me. I guess if the spider powers are a magic thing, it's not too far off base that Kurt Wagner would be into it, because he's one of the characters who's really sidestepping into Marvel mutant magic stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the spider symbolism is really they're gonna have to really
Cy Spurrier gets into it. I think we'll do it. I mean, I think we'll get there.
Did bring us the spirit of variance.
Yeah, exactly. So this is very that in terms of like, let's cross over with another property in a weird magical way, but somehow it makes sense and we all fall in love with it.
When I think exactly like Dan Slott, I think Cy Spurrier.
Now, I was
Hang on one sec. I just want to pull up because I think this is the perfect pivot point to get into the Spider-Verse.
I was curious about why this fell under the Marvel Voices imprint.
As was I. Marvel Voices is really starting to, in some ways, feel like Stormbreakers insofar as like it's about showcasing writers sometimes and less about showcasing identities. I don't know. It's a little confusing. Nico, I feel like you have an idea.
Well, I mean, I actually think it has more to do with the reality of optics. Like, yeah. I would rather hear we are working to create a story that contains the multitudinous nature of spider people than this book is just gay. Because, like, this book is just gay does not mean one thing. It means 100 things. And, like, this book is just black. Oh my God. Any friend of mine who is a person of color will tell you there is no one way to be that of color culture anyway. And so sometimes when I hear Marvel Voices, the gay book, I'm like, what makes it gay? Is Bruce Valanche going to come and slap my ass with it? And like, no. I just installed a Wise Lock. No one is breaking into my house and slapping my ass.
That was not something you wanted. That's not something you were suggesting.
Right. Okay. No, but if Simu Liu wants to come with every copy of the Voices that had Shang-Chi in it, he's more than welcome.
That's okay. That's getting through the lock.
Yeah, that he can have the code.
Okay.
Your episode of Worth It was my favorite. So yeah, this really, I don't know. I've read every page of everything called Spider-Verse, even the little kid flip books. Like literally the little kid wooden picture books called Spider-Verse. I've read them. We watched multiple animated versions of it. We read every possible version of Into the Spider-Verse. And this felt like, I don't know why this was Spider-Verse. I don't know why this was Marvel Voices. There was nothing about this that felt like a celebration. This felt like a checklist of what to get published. Each of the stories was great. Like actually, each of the writers did a beautiful job. The artists made beautiful art. But this is an example where each one of these stories would have been a whole lot more effective separately on Unlimited than I feel I got for paying for this book.
It felt like this was almost like an incoming or like a timeless or like this is like a setup for these are the characters and their ongoing stories in the Marvel Spider-Verse coming up. So, preview, pay attention more than like we're trying to represent something.
But I'll really be shocked if they're all going to actually get that treatment. And like Vita Ayala and Alberto Albuquerque and Rachel Rosenberg, Vita Ayala on writing, Alberto Albuquerque on art, and Rachel Rosenberg on color art for this first story with Miles Morales. Nico, you said it perfectly. It's a fantastic story, but it does feel a little bit like a checklist story. It gives us very basic Miles structure of this is who he is, this is who he fights, this is what he worries about. He's got family stuff, family concerns, and at the end of the day he gets back to his house and his mom totally gets that he is a spider person and life isn't easy. That's fantastic. It's really well written. I love Vita Ayala. But we are actually doing, like, there's a Spider-Verse Infinity comic that is telling those exact stories, as you said, where it feels like this might have really popped. And, you know, for this particular thing, I'm fine because I feel like, you know, Miles really is getting his flowers and everybody knows and loves Miles. But I think when we get to Web Weaver is when I think this is a character that's tucked into a book and not being highlighted.
Tucked, you say?
Oh, she's not tucked.
And this is, of course, by Steve Fox. This is Fire with Fire, featuring Web Weaver, Cooper Cohen, by Steve Fox, with art by Luciano Vecchio, and colors by Ruth Redmond. I think for a lot of people, this was one of the issues that one of the stories we knew we would be talking about and having feelings about. And I had feelings.
I don't know that I did.
Okay.
I feel like the trap we're in with a lot of these characters right now is they're not getting a chance to grow, because we lived in a period where, like, when I worked at a comic shop when Miles Morales came out. Good God, that was a moment. And like, it was instant. The reaction was wild. But there weren't 1,000 characters they were trying to push on 10 platforms. So Miles Morales got the kind of treatment that made him Miles Morales. Spider-Gwen is actually like the last of them. And after that, everybody is just sort of getting this, oh, yes, that's the one of those. Yes, right. The several of them. Good to know. Yes. Oh, of course. And it just becomes hard to keep track. And Web Weaver is super cool. And I love this, you know, what we're doing. But I go back to this moment that took place on our show 2 years ago, where a character was introduced that issue for the first time ever. And somebody was like, oh, and they're the best, you know it, we all love them. And everybody in the room was going crazy for this character. And I was like, no, I'm sorry, I don't know why. They have 2 panels. I love their design, but that's 2 panels, and you're saying they always this and they always that. You're headcanoning.
It's that classic him.
Yeah. This is like the 5th appearance of Web Weaver, maybe the 10th appearance of Web Weaver. And
I think it's a lot fewer than that. I think this is.
I
like
do
the third.
too, but I'm being really cool.
Yeah.
And I want to celebrate it. I want to celebrate Web Weaver.
Yeah.
But other than, oh, you're gay? Cool. What am I celebrating? Because one of the things that this character is meant to be is a pastiche of Peter Parker. Mm-hmm. It's meant to be a copy and paste of Peter Parker. So I'm not getting a unique character. I'm getting a unique take on it. Exactly. Yeah. And I'm here for it. I love gay. I love gay in short shorts. Daddy does love a nice booty. But I feel like this is not Steve Fox's failing, not Luciano Vecchio's failing, not even really the editorial's failing. It's the failing of an industry that clamors for 200 pages of this character and then financially supports 10. And you can't blame the artists for being unwilling to work for free. You can't blame the publishers for being unwilling to jeopardize the possibility of employment for their writers. So it kind of comes down to the people saying that they want these stories. They got to start paying for them, or they need to be like, let's help change comics. Marvel subscription. You don't pay for any book. You just get them weekly, something. But these characters need more than they're getting, because you can't sustain them like you used to, but everybody's looking for that classic sustenance.
Well, and at the same time, we've gotten a lot further away from the era where they would introduce a queer character, hype them up in the media, and then shortly later murder them brutally. I'm looking at you, Freedom Ring. I
Gated death.
Penetrate. Oh, anyway, I don't know a lot about Web Weaver as a character beyond
There's not a lot to know.
Beyond what he represents. And I like what he represents because, and TK, you and I have talked about this a little bit, but I think femme-gay representation is really low in comics, especially. This is a character who is especially representing that, and this gives, you know, an entry point, an access point, you know, visibility to a whole host of readers who may not see themselves in the comic experience and the superhero experience. I think the fact that, you know, they're showing us a superhero who is specifically coded as femme and gay and is very heroic and strong and capable, that to me is the for a book like this, you know, where we're just getting a short story, that visibility is the takeaway. That visibility is the point. Now, I sure would like to see more stories about this character because, you know, they interest me and I want to know what their life is like beyond what feels like this should have been a story in a Marvel Voices Pride anthology and not a Marvel Voices Spider.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mike. They're at a Pride thing. He's at a Pride thing at Fire Island. So yeah, I want to know what's going on with this character. I want to know. Oh, I love that symbiote. I want to know who this character is. This is a person. I want to know who this person is.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you kind of a question that kind of launches out of that, and I mean it really positively. I don't think Web Weaver reads that femme. I think he just reads like a trendy queer. I think when the language changes and gets a little bit mask-er, he's going to get more mask. And he just reads like a trendy white gay to me. He doesn't read like connecting to the femme experience, connecting to the queer person of color experience. And so in a lot of ways, while I'm really grateful for what he represents, of course they went with an attractive, thick, white, hot gay boy. Of course they did, because Peter Parker can't be too many things that are off book. And this is still a Peter Parker, but of course his name is not Peter Parker.
No, because Peter Parker could not be gay.
Because Peter Parker could not pack a peck of peckers in his mouth.
This is alliteration still, but it's a very different alliteration because Peter Parker is not gay and is not in love with Johnny Storm.
That is correct. So
And vice versa.
There is that vibe for sure.
I just sort of wish that this, because it's not Steve Fox. Steve Fox is killing it doing this. Like, even if you are the person taking what someone might call a half step, this is the furthest they're letting him jump. He's not doing something bad or wrong, right? It really is about a corporate culture that needs to change to support these books. Because I'm so sorry, by all means.
I was going to say there is kind of the Iceman issue of it all reflected in this. This is, you know, where Iceman holds that position down in X World. It seems like Web Weaver is being propped up to similarly be like, oh look, we got one of these, and that's not fair to readers and people who want to see this kind of representation be more fleshed out, be more nuanced. We want these characters to be characters and not just icons of an identity. You know, we're so much more than the identity politics that we bring to the table. We're real people with real stories. That's what I'd like to see happen with these characters who we point to and say, like, well, I see myself represented in this character, but, you know, what is their story? Give me that story.
And, you know, I want to give real credit to, I got to pull out my credits, to Jeremy Holtz, the writer, Eric Coda on art, and Eric Arciniega on color art for an Unraveling Web, this gorgeous second-person story of Cindy Moon that I just was not expecting. And I was so impressed by.
Over here.
What's that?
We are Silk Boys over here.
We are big-time Silk Boys, and we're
I think
really
you
excited.
can call us Silk Merchants.
We're really excited for the new Silk series that's coming out. This was so beautifully wrought. I can't think of I don't think I've ever seen a second-person comic.
What is this? Bright Lights, Big City?
Yeah, I mean, it's just very. I'm so impressed with the perspective on it, and you know, I don't know what it really tells us about. I mean, it tells a really beautiful story about a person. I don't know how it folds into her larger narrative, but like, it's a beautiful moment to have with this character that I just like feel like deserves beautiful moments.
And the fact that she is okay, I'm so sorry, Jake, but this is going to be one of those things. So, Teak, you're current on Spider-Man?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's the most, they've revealed that the only person who can possibly replace Peter Parker in the entirety of the multiverse as the most important Spider person ever is Cindy Moon. And that if Peter Parker were gone, Silk would have always been the Spider-Man. we would have always just had Silk if there was no Peter Parker.
And, they have alluded to how important she is in Spider-Verse stuff in this way that is very, like, it's important that they could have sex.
Yeah.
And that's been gross and weird.
It's kind of hot, though.
It's very hot. They're very hot
she
together.
was introduced to, like, she was locked in a room for forever, and then suddenly Peter was like, I'm all over you.
Yeah, there's a weird thing there. It's complicated and not necessarily worth getting into, because I think what's happening is we're changing it, and like respect to the author who came up with both things, because the same author who's writing Spider-Man right now and changing this mythos was the one who has Cindy Moon and Spider-Man with this insane sexual tension that like is because she has a role in Spider mythos stuff, but it feels like that role is to have sex with Peter. And now, after all these years of that really being all that was said about it, it does feel like we are changing things.
Wait, are you saying the real victory is the Peter that was inside her all along?
Oh.
I hate you for that because it's so right. But yeah, I mean, I don't quite know how this beautiful story folds into that, but I love it. I mean, I love this so much.
It's a very day in the life of turn off your cell phone, Cindy.
Yeah. And then we get to Spider-Punk. Written by, it's got music for uplifting gormandizers, written by Jay Holtham, with art by Ken Lashley and color art by CC Delacruz. I should also mention that VC's Travis Lanham did the letters for all of these. Nico, I never know where we fell on this in all our Spider-Person reading, but by the end of the whole thing, I was kind of a Spider-Punk person. I feel like maybe you were not. Am I correct about that?
I find him very annoying.
Yeah, I get it.
As a guy who walked around with a guitar on his back for 20 years, like I legitimately, this is not the cover of Once on DVD starring me. This is irritating. I don't want to walk the line with you. I want to set you on a ring of fire. I do want to say, though, that I am an enormous Ken Lashley fan.
This is gorgeous art.
And he has done some beautiful work at Marvel over the years on like Excalibur, and it's just really great to see this incredible artist of color, get work in a couple of Pride anthologies in a row now. Voices anthologies. Not everything is gay. What an agenda. But yeah, I just think this is some of the best art in the whole book. The coloration, though, really takes the cake, and I know he didn't do the colors. Yeah. Really stunning work.
I love the idea that in this universe, Man-Wolf is a band.
It just makes me really wish that Spellbound was in this somehow.
Oh, man. If only.
Zizix, please.
Yeah, I don't know these. I didn't know the characters, and it was a cute story, but I think more than anything, the thing that stuck out for me was the art on this was just phenomenal.
Yeah. Love the Sinister Six piece. I mean, come on. I don't know. It just gave me... Spider-Punk stories are always kind of you get exactly what you think you're going to get, and they never really blow your mind, but in a way that I'm kind of okay with, and I just ultimately really, really enjoy.
Kind of that's how I feel about Muse albums. I kind of know exactly what I'm going to get. It's not like a Papa Roach album where I kind of know exactly what I'm going to get.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Yeah, that's a good descriptor.
And from that to one that we were eagerly anticipating and just talking about, we had Jason Lowe's written and drawn by Jason Lowe.
Wasn't it? It was so good.
Working it out. We got Peter Park. Jason talked to us a little bit about this on Monday, and Jason, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. As you were pitching it, I was like, I don't think I get it. And as soon as I read the first page, I was like, I get this, and I want it all the time.
Because the thing that Jason Lowe captures for me better than anybody working in truly, like, not because he's super nice to me. That's why we ask him on the show, so he can be nice to me. He catches the moments between breaths better than anybody. Like there's that second where, and we all have it. And like, I have it standing at my bedroom window the most often, where there's that moment where like, you've just taken in the breath, you feel it coming out, but you're just not sure what's going to happen next. You're not sure where you are. All of your feelings are at the top of your chest with this breath. And as it goes out, you can kind of pack the feelings back down for a minute and you just go about your day. And it's like Jason catches those breaths in every panel.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, you know, artistically, he's an incredible character designer. This is a really cool outfit. Spider Friend. It's, you know, I think if you hear it right off the bat, you might think like Shrug, but it becomes one of those things like Pete Spiderman.
The hottest spider character.
I just said it so
time.
you could have the meltdown. Where, like, you know, you raise an eyebrow, but then you see it on the page and you're like, again, I want so much more of this.
I just really also like what he's doing with this meditation on the focus of sitcom. You know, how he's kind of like pointing at friends and being like, they did it wrong. They put all the emphasis on these boring white people and put all the people of color in the background or as bit characters. You know, this is a great spin because you get to see how disconnected and ditzy they all look, you know, with the concerns that they have versus, you know, the real existential concerns that Peter Park has, both about his work as Spider-Friend, his place in the lives of his friends, his capacity to step up and be independent and self-supporting. Like, there's something so charming about this guy who's like, yeah, no, but like I love them, but also I kind of hate them, and they're not really great friends. But he still tries anyway. And my hope would be in watching this character move forward that he'd grow enough to see how crappy these friends are, and that he could do so much better with another group of people or on his own.
Well, should he become part of the Spider-Verse and start interacting with like a new version of the Web Warriors? You know, should he meet Mayday? God forbid. I feel like he would really suddenly have this whole other group of friends, and it would be such a cool, you know, fourth wall shattering because he lives in a sitcom universe.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about that is so, it's one of the things that it is why I like Spider-Punk, because Spider-Punk's universe is kind of in that way that you said about this Guardians of the Galaxy run. Spider-Punk's universe is so skinned. It's skinned towards musical life in a world where everybody is constantly doing music stuff. This one is skinned towards sitcom life. And I love when those really specific Spider-Verses mix with the kind of standard spider situation.
Mm-hmm.
I like that a lot better than when it's like, oh, this Spider-Man is from the 1800s.
I like it when it's Spider-Verse more than when it's Spider No Anal.
That was beautiful, Nico. Thank you.
Spider Bottom. Spider Side. Or Spider Switch. I like Spider Switch.
I
could go for a Spider Switch.
It's I hear what you're saying, TK. I think about like the mecha spider situation, like the iterations, different iterations on a theme rather than like, you know, ancient or, you know, future. Although they have their place too. 2099 Spider-Man's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and you know, there's always going to be more spider content, so I never super worry about you know, I think everybody eventually gets their time. I wanted to give props. You know, there's a few more stories in this. I don't want to cover every single one, but I wanted to give props to Cheryl Lynn Eaton, the writer, Julian Shaw, the artist, and Andrew Dahlhaus for Recluse Endangerment, where we are introduced to Recluse. I love a spider that is specifically species themed.
Oh God, not me.
So I appreciated this one a lot.
It just reminds me too much of the actual recluse spider, which is a terrifying thing to look at if you see them.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, overall, I really enjoyed this run. I think we talked about some of the concerns regarding what is happening with the publishing of a book like this, and you know, I definitely share them. But I live in hope that these characters will get the stories they deserve, and if nothing else, become part of the anthologies that they deserve.
You know, and to that, I just want to say the only other thing that I felt maybe this book pointed out to me was if Spider is into, like, you know, the Into the Spider-Verse Pride removes a bunch of published books called Voices, then this week had like 9-second printings
Yeah.
and one book called Voices that is meant to service the needs of all minorities.
We can do better than that, I think.
I think we sure can.
So, you know, a lot of other stuff was released this week. We had Bloodline, Daughter of Blade, which is on issue number 3. We had the start of Cold War with the dovetailing of both Captain America books. We got Carnage number 12. We had Fantastic Four number 6. Moon Knight 22.
Just side note, Fantastic Four number 6 was my jump off point.
I agree. You know, I did have that scheduled for us to talk about, but we are running a little long, and I actually had it slotted in, and then we got this news about Nightcrawler Spider, and I was like, let's go to Spider-Verse, because ultimately I'm not really passionate. I think it's beautifully drawn. I think Johnny Storm looks really sexy with a mustache. I just don't know what we're doing with the first family, man. I don't.
Well, because they're never the first family. It's two
Right.
of them at a time. It's two
Right.
of them, one of them, three of them, one of them, two of them, one of them.
Well, it's the only interesting Fantastic Four story is to take one of the 4 out.
But if you really need to tell a story called Fantastic Order of Operations, then I ask that you put in interesting things like Herbie Squared or Baxter Building to the -1/2.
Not to mention the plot that they're dealing with right now is just so... It's an algae bloom. They're trying to fight an algae bloom, and you're
they're
telling me
twiddling
they
their
can't fight an
thumbs.
algae bloom?
They're twiddling their thumbs while they wait for their kids to get home. And it's, on the one hand, like, it's kind of a funny setup, but I would have actually rather leaned a lot harder into the humor than tried to give them Monster of the Week missions that, you know, sometimes spill over. I agree. I unfortunately think it's my jumping off point, but it's another one. I live in hope that somebody figures it out. Silver Surfer Ghostlight is also at number 3, and for Bloodline and Silver Surfer, I think I just want to wait until we have the full story. That is kind of the problem with these 5-issue minis, is, you know, when we're triaging what to cover, because there's just so much and we have so much to say, it doesn't seem to do them justice to pick the random middle stuff that really sometimes comes together completely by the end, or it turns out by the end it really fails, and it feels unfair to talk about it without having that whole perspective.
I agree with that, especially with regards to Bloodline, which I've been keeping up with, because it's a pretty standard origin story in some ways, but, because it's dealing with Blade, because it's dealing with a young woman of color coming into her power, I think that there's a lot of nuance and perspective that's being offered by the writing and the writer and artist that make this a different thing. But I think that's not really going to crystallize until the story has completed, until we see where we're leaving this character by the end.
It's the same. Sorry, go ahead.
I think that both X-23 and
I was just about to say that. So perfect.
Bloodline suffer from what Red and Gold Goblin both suffer from, which are these are excellent books that play terribly because there's nothing supporting them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
They have nothing working with them to make them feel more legitimate. I think Bloodline is I'm forced to give it C's. Like, it's not a great issue, but what it's creating, it's worth your money. And if you don't think that buying this is going to be an investment, you're crazy, because
it's an A character,
and
I think it'll be
A+ character.
Yeah, and I think her potential is A++. And having read the 5, I think you'll be very happy. Telling you at 3, let's get into it, is the really tough thing, and that is the big question mark around doing all these 4-issue, 5-issue, 6 issues. And so, with limited time and a lot to say, that's why those didn't get covered. Of course, one of the big ones this week was Storm and the Brotherhood of Mutants. We are going to do a full go over of Sins of Sinister. This one especially kind of actually falls into a similar category, where beautiful book, but I think discussing it on its own is really tough, and there's not a ton. It's like looking at it's beautiful, but I think it needs context, and we're almost done. So
it's the opposite of Ten of Swords. Ten of Swords, I felt like every issue was trying to do nothing.
Yeah.
So that the whole story could do something. And instead here, every issue is doing so much. I don't know what the hell the Sins of Sinister is about. Yeah. I'm not even sure that it's about Sinister anymore.
Yeah. it feels like a lot of it is about each of the three authors' incredible skills being on display in this world that I can't get a footing in because I'm not supposed to, which is cool. But it does make it difficult to discuss individual issues. And I think it makes it difficult to discuss the three that are, it's Nightcrawlers as a 3 is tough to discuss too. It's all 11 or nothing. So, with that all said, those were the books to talk about this week. Before we wrap up, Jake, where can everybody find you?
Oh, bopping my mic. You can find me on the internet. You can find me on the internet on Twitter at Mega Sentinel. It's right down there, actually. And then you can also find me on Instagram at The Heart Farmer. Those are the places that you can find me. And I'm Jake. Hi.
And Nico.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Nico Action. That's NICOACTION.
And I'm TK. You guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at XNateXGrayX. I just want to thank you all for joining us. I had so much fun talking about this week's books with you. I'm excited to keep doing it. And, I had a blast.
Me too.
Same.
So until next time, thank you everybody for joining us, and we will see you.
I just want to pop in too, real
Yeah.
quick, and I want to make sure that we are talking about what we got coming up. For the
Thank
rest
you
of the
so much.
weekend.
I should not have said
Yep.
we'll see you so fast. We have some awesome stuff
Absolutely.
coming up. It's a big night tonight. It's the Gay
Yes,
Olympics.
it is.
We'll all be watching the season finale of Drag Race and waiting to see who's crowned. And then tomorrow afternoon, we'll have a fantastic roundup of that. And then of course on Sunday, we're going to be catching up with the MCU.
Yeah, it's been a while since we caught up in terms of our content. It was a huge staple of Husbands Talking, more or less, and there's certainly a lot to catch up on, so we're pretty excited to talk about what a cluster beef it has been since the last time we discussed it. We were so excited for Phase 4 and everything they announced at SDCC 2019, and now here we are. So we're going to talk a bit about that. We're going to talk about what's in store, what we're excited about, and what we're terrified of. So that'll be fun.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
All right. So until next time, we'll see you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.